She was just a waitress in a stained apron, invisible to the billionaires sitting at the VIP table. They laughed at her shoes, mocked her pay, and treated her like furniture. But when the arrogance of an Arab oil tycoon went too far, he made one fatal mistake. He assumed she was stupid. He didn't know that the woman pouring his water spoke 6 languages, and she understood every word of the criminal conspiracy he was planning in a secret dialect. Watch how one waitress turned a humiliating tip into $1 billion revenge that destroyed an empire in seconds. You won't believe who she really was. The rain in London wasn't just rain. It was a cold, miserable sheet of grey that soaked into your bones. Sarah pushed through the heavy revolving doors of the Kensington Monarch, shaking her umbrella. She was 25 minutes early for her shift, but in a place like the Monarch, being on time was considered late. The Kensington Monarch wasn't just a hotel, it was a fortress of wealth. It was where the 0.1% came to hide from the 1%. A cup of tea here cost more than most people's weekly grocery bill, and Sarah was the lowest rung on this golden ladder. She was a server in the Sapphire Lounge, the hotel's ultra-exclusive bar. You look like a drowned rat, Sarah. The floor manager, a sharp-featured man named Preston, sneered as she entered the locker room. Preston was the kind of man who would step over a dying person to pick up a dropped penny. He wore suits that were too tight and a cologne that smelled like desperation and pine needles. "Good evening to you too, Preston," Sarah muttered, opening her locker. She pulled out her uniform, a stiff black dress with a white apron that had to be starched to perfection. "Big night tonight," Preston said, leaning against the doorframe, checking his Rolex Submariner. A fake, Sarah suspected, though she never said it. "We have a VIP delegation, Middle Eastern royalty and American hedge fund money. Table 1, the deal table." Sarah's stomach tightened. The deal table meant high stress. It meant men who didn't look at you when they ordered, who snapped their fingers like you were a dog, and who tipped based on how pretty they found your smile, not how good your service was. "I'll handle it," Sarah said, tying her hair back into a severe, tight bun. She checked her reflection. She looked tired. There were dark circles under her hazel eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. She had been studying until 4 a.m., her brain buzzing with contract law and international trade regulations. But here she was just the help. "You better," Preston warned. "The guest is Karim Al-Sayed. You know the name?" Sarah paused. Everyone knew the name. Karim Al-Sayed was a billionaire developer from Dubai, known for buying historic British buildings and evicting everyone inside to build luxury condos. He was ruthless, arrogant, and rumored to be involved in deals that danced on the edge of legality. "I know him," Sarah said quietly. "Good. He's meeting with Arthur Sterling from the Sterling Group. They are discussing the acquisition of the Blackwood estate. If you drop a spoon, if you breathe too loud, if you exist too much in their space, you're fired. Do you understand? I won't hesitate, Sarah. You're replaceable." "I understand, Preston." Sarah walked out onto the floor. The Sapphire Lounge was dimly lit, smelling of old leather, expensive scotch, and old money. Crystal chandeliers threw fractured light across the velvet booths. She checked her pocket. She had her small notepad and a pen. But in her mind, she carried much more. Preston thought she was just a waitress struggling to pay rent in a shoebox apartment in Brixton. He didn't know about the life she had left behind, or the 6 years she had spent in Geneva, or the fact that the drowned rat understood the geopolitical landscape better than the men she was about to serve. At 8 p.m. sharp, the doors opened. Karim Al-Sayed entered like he owned the oxygen in the room. He was a large man, impeccably dressed in a bespoke Savile Row suit, flanked by 2 bodyguards who looked like stone statues. Behind him trailed Arthur Sterling, a nervous-looking British man with thinning hair and a briefcase he clutched like a life-preserver. They bypassed the host and went straight to Table 1, the secluded booth in the back, shielded by heavy velvet curtains. Preston snapped his fingers at Sarah. "Go! Water. Sparkling. And don't make eye contact unless spoken to." Sarah took the silver tray. She took a deep breath. It was showtime. Sarah approached the table with the silent grace of a ghost. She had perfected the art of being invisible. Karim was already talking, his voice booming. He was laughing, a deep, guttural sound that didn't reach his eyes. "Pathetic little regulations, Arthur. You British worry too much about heritage. Heritage is just a word for old rotting wood." "I will bulldoze it all," Arthur Sterling chuckled nervously. "Of course, Mr. Al-Sayed, but the council is very strict about the Blackwood estate. There are listed buildings." "Money lists the buildings and money unlists them." Karim waved his hand dismissively. He paused as Sarah placed the crystal glasses on the table. He didn't look up. He simply gestured with 2 fingers for her to pour. Sarah poured the Pellegrino, careful not to spill a drop. "And get us the 1982 Chateau Margaux," Karim ordered, still looking at Arthur. "And caviar. The beluga. Not that cheap rubbish you serve tourists." "Right away, sir," Sarah said softly. Karim stopped. He slowly turned his head to look at her. It was the first time he acknowledged her presence. He scanned her up and down, a look of amused disgust on his face. He looked at Arthur. "You see, Arthur, this is the problem with this country. You hire these little mice. Look at her." He gestured to Sarah as if she were a lamp. "Does she even know what Chateau Margaux is? She probably drinks cider from a can." Arthur laughed, eager to please his investor. "Good help is hard to find, Karim." "What is your name, girl?" Karim asked, leaning back, lighting a cigar despite the strict no-smoking signs. "Sarah, sir," she replied, keeping her voice neutral. "Sarah," he mocked, tasting the name. A plain name for a plain girl. "Tell me, Sarah, do you dream of being a model? Or maybe an actress? Is that why you are here, waiting for a producer to discover you?" "I am here to work, sir," she said. Karim laughed again. He turned to Arthur and switched languages effortlessly. He spoke in rapid, fluid French. "Regarde-la. Elle a l'air vide. Une jolie coquille sans cerveau. Look at her. She looks empty. A pretty shell with no brain." Arthur, who spoke passable French, smirked. "C'est juste une serveuse, Karim. Ne perds pas ton temps." "She's just a waitress, Karim. Don't waste your time." Sarah froze for a microsecond. Her French was rusty, perhaps, but impeccable. She had learned it during her 2 years at the Sorbonne, before everything fell apart. She finished pouring the water. She wanted to walk away. She needed this job. She needed the money for her father's care facility. She couldn't afford to be proud. But Karim wasn't done. He enjoyed cat-and-mouse games. He wanted to assert dominance over everything in his orbit, from the billion-dollar real estate market to the waitress pouring his water. He looked at her, blowing smoke in her direction. "You can go now. Run along. Go fetch the wine. Try not to drop it. It costs more than your life." Sarah turned to leave. "Wait," Karim called out. She stopped and turned back. "I bet she thinks we are talking about love," Karim said to Arthur, switching to Italian this time. "Scommetto che pensa che siamo gentili. Gli americani e gli inglesi sono così stupidi. Sorridono quando li insulti." "I bet she thinks we are nice. Americans and British are so stupid. They smile when you insult them." Sarah's hand gripped the empty silver tray. Italian. She had spent her summers in Tuscany with her grandmother. It was the language of her childhood. She looked at Karim. The disrespect was palpable. It wasn't just rude, it was dehumanizing. "Is there something else, sir?" she asked in English. Karim smirked. "No, just wondering if you have the capacity to understand the importance of this table. But looking at you, I doubt you understand anything beyond a dinner menu." He waved her away. Sarah walked back to the bar. Her heart was pounding against her ribs. "What did they say?" Preston asked, hovering by the POS system. "Did they complain?" "No," Sarah said, punching in the order for the $4,000 bottle of wine. "They're just talking." "About the deal?" "About me," she murmured. "Well, don't let it go to your head. Get that wine out there." Sarah took the bottle of Chateau Margaux from the cellar. She cradled the dust-covered bottle. She took a deep breath. Be professional. Be invisible. But as she walked back to the table, she heard them again. They were louder now, emboldened by the alcohol and the privacy of the booth. Karim was leaning in, his voice low but intense. "Arthur, listen to me," Karim said in English. "We signed the papers tonight, but the environmental report, the one about the chemical runoff in the soil that disappears. You understand?" Arthur looked pale. "Karim, that's if the council finds out." "They won't," Karim snapped. Then, noticing Sarah approaching, he immediately switched languages again. He switched to German. Harsh, guttural German. "Das Dokument ist bereits zerstört. Niemand wird es finden. Wir bestechen den Inspektor morgen früh." "The document is already destroyed. No one will find it. We bribe the inspector tomorrow morning." Sarah uncorked the wine. Her hand didn't shake. German. Her minor in university. She knew the word bestechen, bribe. She poured the wine for Arthur first, then Karim. Karim watched her, his eyes glittering with malice. He decided to poke the bear one last time. He wanted to see if the dumb waitress would react to the harsh sounds of German. "Thank you," he said in English, dripping with sarcasm. Then, looking her dead in the eye, he spoke to Arthur in Russian, a language he assumed was completely alien to a London waitress. "Ona смотрит на меня как корова. She looks at me like a cow." Something inside Sarah snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet click of a safety being turned off. She set the bottle down on the coaster. She stood up straight, smoothing her apron. She looked at Arthur Sterling. Then she turned her gaze to Karim al-Sayed. She didn't leave. "Is there a problem?" Karim asked in English, annoyed that she was still standing there. "Go." Sarah smiled. It was a cold, polite smile. "Actually, sir," she said, her voice clear and steady, "I believe the cow is a sacred animal in some cultures, but I prefer to be compared to something with a bit more bite." Karim's eyes widened slightly. "What?" Sarah looked at him. "And regarding your previous comments," she took a breath, and then she spoke. The silence at table 1 was heavier than the velvet curtains surrounding them. Sarah looked directly at Karim. She shifted her stance, no longer the subservient server, but someone holding court. "Monsieur," she began, her French accent perfect, Parisian and crisp. "Je ne suis pas une coquille vide, mais je comprends que pour un homme comme vous, l'intelligence chez une femme est une menace. Sir, I am not an empty shell, but I understand that for a man like you, intelligence in a woman is a threat." Arthur Sterling dropped his fork. It clattered loudly against the china. Karim's mouth opened slightly, his cigar hanging loosely from his lips. He blinked, processing the shift. Before he could respond, Sarah turned to Arthur, switching flawlessly to Italian. "E per quanto riguarda il sorriso, Signore Sterling," she said, her voice melodic. Sorridiamo non perché siamo stupidi, ma perché siamo educati. Una qualità che il denaro chiaramente non può comprare. And regarding the smile, Mr. Sterling, we smile not because we are stupid, but because we are polite, a quality that money clearly cannot buy. Arthur looked like he was having a stroke. He looked from Sarah to Kareem in panic. Kareem slammed his hand on the table. "Who are you?" he demanded in English. "Preston, get the manager." "I haven't finished," Sarah said, cutting him off. Her voice had a command to it now. She looked back at Kareem. She switched to German. The harsh consonants rolled off her tongue with authority. "Den Inspektor zu bestechen ist eine Straftat, Herr Al-Sayed. Und das Dokument, von dem Sie sagten, es sei zerstört? Ich würde vorsichtig sein. Papierkram hat die Angewohnheit, wieder aufzutauchen. Bribing the inspector is a crime, Mr. Al-Sayed. And the document you said was destroyed? I would be careful. Paperwork has a habit of resurfacing." Kareem's face went from shock to a deep, violent shade of red. The blood drained from Arthur Sterling's face. This wasn't just a waitress understanding insults anymore. She had just repeated their confession to a felony. "You," Kareem stood up, towering over her. "You are a spy. Who sent you? Was it the Americans? The Russians?" "I'm just a waitress, remember?" Sarah said calmly in English. "Just a drowned rat pouring your water." "You speak 3 languages," Kareem hissed. "That's a parlor trick. You learned a few phrases to impress the tourists." 4, she corrected him. "You forgot Russian." She looked him in the eye and spoke in Russian, her voice low and dangerous. "Yana Korova, ya okotnik." "I am not a cow. I am the hunter." Kareem sank back into his chair, genuinely rattled. He looked at his bodyguards, but they were confused, unsure if they should attack a waitress in the middle of a crowded hotel bar. 6, Sarah said, returning to English. "I speak 6 languages, actually. Portuguese and Arabic are the other 2. Would you like to test me in those as well? Or are we done playing games?" Kareem stared at her. His mind was racing. He needed to know how much she had heard. He needed to know if she was wearing a wire. "Sit down," Kareem ordered, pointing to the empty chair across from him. "I have tables to serve," Sarah said. "I said sit down," Kareem barked. He pulled a checkbook from his jacket pocket. "How much? How much to forget the German conversation? £5,000? 10? Sarah looked at the checkbook. She laughed. It was a dry, humourless sound. "You think you can buy me, Mr. Al-Sayed?" "Everyone has a price," he sneered. "Especially a waitress at the Kensington Monarch. I see your shoes. They are old. I see your hands. They are rough. You need money." He began to write a check. £20,000. That is more than you make in a year. Take it, walk away, and forget you heard the word bribe. He ripped the check out and slid it across the marble table. It sat there, a piece of paper that could solve all of Sarah's immediate problems. It could pay for her father's surgery. It could pay her rent for 2 years. Sarah looked at the check. Then she looked at Arthur Sterling. "Mr. Sterling," she said, "does your board of directors know that you are planning to hide the chemical toxicity report for the Blackwood estate? Because if they find out, or if the Environmental Agency finds out, the Sterling Group will be bankrupt by Monday morning." Arthur was shaking. "Please, It was Kareem's idea." "Shut up, Arthur!" Kareem roared. He looked at Sarah with pure hatred. "You have no proof. It's your word against ours. The word of a waitress against a billionaire and a CEO. Who will they believe?" Kareem leaned forward, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "If you open your mouth, I will crush you. I will make sure you never work in London again. I will find your family. I will destroy everything you love. Sarah didn't flinch. She picked up the check. Karim smiled smugly. "Good girl." Sarah slowly tore the check down the middle. Then she tore it again. She dropped the confetti pieces into the expensive crystal ashtray. "You asked me earlier who I was," Sarah said softly. "You assumed I was nobody. That was your first mistake." She leaned in, placing her hands on the table. "My name is Sarah Blackwood." The colour drained from Arthur Sterling's face so fast he looked like a corpse. "Blackwood," Karim repeated, confused. Then the realization hit him. "The Blackwood estate." "The estate you are trying to buy," Sarah said. "The estate my grandfather built. The estate my father lost to predatory lenders. Lenders funded by your shell companies, Mr. Al-Sayed." The silence at the table was now deafening. "I'm not here to serve you wine," Sarah whispered. "I'm here to take back what you stole." The atmosphere in the Sapphire Lounge shifted from awkward tension to palpable danger. The ambient jazz music seemed to fade away, replaced by the buzzing silence of a predator who had just been cornered. Karim Al-Sayed did not panic easily. He was a man who had negotiated with warlords and dismantled companies with a stroke of a pen. But Sarah Blackwood wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a ghost from a past he thought he had buried under lawyers and shell companies. He stared at the torn pieces of the check in the ashtray. His face hardened, the mask of the charming billionaire slipping completely to reveal the thug beneath. He didn't speak to Arthur. He didn't speak to Sarah in English. He turned his head slightly to the massive bodyguard standing to his right, a man named Omar, who had been silent as a statue until now. Karim spoke in a rapid, specific dialect of Gulf Arabic, his voice low and guttural. He assumed with total arrogance that while Sarah might know the textbook Arabic taught in universities, she would never understand the slang of the streets of his hometown. "Listen to me closely," Karim murmured in Arabic. "Wait for her in the alley behind the kitchen. Make it look like a robbery. Break her hands. Make sure she can never write or sign a document again. If she fights, put her in the hospital for a month." Arthur Sterling watched, uncomprehending, wiping sweat from his forehead with a napkin. "What? What are you saying, Karim?" Sarah stood perfectly still. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird, but her face remained a mask of icy calm. She had spent a year in Dubai, working as a translator for an oil conglomerate before the family estate collapsed. She knew the dialect. She knew the slang. She knew exactly what "break her hands" meant. She looked at Omar, the bodyguard, who gave a nearly imperceptible nod. Then she looked back at Karim. Her eyes locked onto his. "Mr. Al-Sayed," Sarah said, her voice dropping an octave, shifting into flawless, native-sounding Arabic. "If your dog touches me, the recording of this entire conversation goes directly to the Serious Fraud Office and the BBC." Karim froze. It was as if she had slapped him. The glass of wine in his hand trembled. "You speak," he stammered in Arabic, his arrogance finally shattering. "I told you," Sarah continued in Arabic, her words sharp as a whip. "I speak 6 languages, and I understand the language of cowards best of all." She reached into the front pocket of her apron and pulled out her smartphone. The screen was glowing red. "Recording 1402. She tapped the screen. Saved. "Cloud upload complete," she said in English, holding the phone up. "Technology is wonderful, isn't it? Even a dumb waitress knows how to use the cloud." Karim lunged. It was a desperate, foolish move. He scrambled over the table, knocking over the 4,000 bottle of Chateau Margaux. The red wine spilled across the white tablecloth like blood. "Give me that phone," he roared. Sarah stepped back quickly. Omar, the bodyguard, moved to intercept her. his massive frame blocking the exit to the main bar. "Preston!" Sarah screamed at the top of her lungs, her voice cutting through the lounge. "Call the police!" The commotion drew the eyes of every patron in the room. Heads turned. A hush fell over the bar. Preston, the manager, came running over, looking horrified, not at the assault, but at the scene being caused in his precious hotel. "What is the meaning of this?" Preston hissed, grabbing Sarah by the arm. "He just assaulted me," Sarah said loudly, wrenching her arm free. "And he ordered his guard to attack me. I have it all recorded." Kareem straightened his suit, regaining his composure instantly. He smiled at Preston, though his eyes were murderous. "The girl is hysterical, Preston. She spilled wine on me, and when I reprimanded her, she started screaming. She is clearly unstable. I think she has been drinking." Preston looked at the billionaire, then at Sarah. The choice for him was simple. One was a client who spent millions. The other was an employee he paid minimum wage. "Sarah," Preston said coldly, "give Mr. Al-Sayed his phone back." "It's my phone," Sarah snapped. "You're fired," Preston said. "Get out. Now. Before I call security and have you dragged out." "You don't have to fire me," Sarah said, ripping off her apron and throwing it onto the wine-soaked table. It landed right in front of Arthur Sterling. "I quit." "But Preston, if you let them leave before the police arrive, you're an accessory to conspiracy. Get out," Preston shouted. Sarah turned and ran. She didn't go to the locker room. She didn't get her coat or her umbrella. She knew Omar was just waiting for the signal to follow her. She bolted through the main doors of the Kensington Monarch, bursting out into the cold, pouring London rain. She didn't stop running. She sprinted down the slick pavement, her black waitressing shoes splashing through puddles, the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She turned a corner, then another, weaving through the labyrinth of London streets until she was sure she wasn't being followed. Only when she reached the safety of a crowded tube station did she stop. She leaned against the tiled wall, gasping for air, shaking uncontrollably. She pulled her phone out of her pocket. Her hands were wet and trembling. She pressed play. The audio was crisp and clear. "We bribe the inspector tomorrow morning. Break her hands." Sarah closed her eyes and let out a sob that was half laughter, half terror. She had the gun. Now she just had to pull the trigger. 3 hours later, Sarah sat in the small living room of her father's care home. The room smelled of antiseptic and boiled cabbage. In the bed, William Blackwood slept, a shadow of the man he used to be. Once, William had been a titan of industry, the proud owner of the Blackwood estate, a sprawling property in the countryside that had been in their family for 4 generations. But he was a man of honor, and that had been his downfall. When he discovered the toxic dumping on the edge of his land, dumping authorized by a subcontractor linked to Al-Sayed's green energy firm, he had tried to fight them legally. They buried him. Legal fees, lawsuits, frozen assets. The stress had caused a massive stroke 2 years ago. He lost the ability to speak clearly, and shortly after, the bank foreclosed on the estate. Sarah had left her life in Paris, her studies, and her future to come back to London, working double shifts as a waitress to pay for his private care, refusing to let him rot in a state facility. "I have them, Dad," she whispered, holding his frail hand. "I finally have them." William stirred, his eyes opening. He looked at her, confusion clouding his gaze, but he squeezed her hand weakly. Sarah's phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" "You made quite an exit," a male voice said. It wasn't Kareem. It was deep, British, and sounded amused. "Who is this?" Sarah demanded, gripping the phone tight. "My name is Liam Cross. I'm a journalist. I was at the bar tonight. Table 4. I saw everything. I also speak German, by the way, and I saw the terror in Arthur Sterling's eyes. Sarah knew the name. Liam Cross was an investigative reporter who had been fired from the Daily Chronicle a year ago for flying too close to the sun, allegedly for trying to expose corruption in the London property market. How did you get my number? I have sources. Look, Sarah, if you have what I think you have on that phone, your life is in danger. Karim Al-Sayed doesn't just sue people, he makes them disappear. You need help. You need a platform. I'm going to the police, Sarah said. The police? Liam laughed dryly. The chief commissioner plays golf with Arthur Sterling every Sunday. If you walk into a police station with that recording, it will accidentally get deleted, and you'll be arrested for corporate espionage or blackmail. Sarah went cold. She knew he was right. The system was rigged. She had learned that the hard way when her father lost everything in court, despite being innocent. What do you propose? She asked. Meet me. There's a safe house in Shoreditch. Bring the phone. We don't just want to arrest him, Sarah. We want to destroy him. We want to burn his reputation so badly that even his money can't save him. Sarah looked at her father sleeping in the bed. This was the only way. Text me the address, she said. 2 days later, Sarah and Liam sat in a cluttered apartment filled with monitors and stacks of files. Liam was a disheveled man with intense blue eyes and a relentless energy. The audio is gold, Liam said, listening to the recording for the 10th time. But it's not enough. He'll claim it's deepfake AI. He'll claim you doctored it. We need the physical document he mentioned, the chemical toxicity report. He said it was destroyed, Sarah said, pacing the room. She was wearing an oversized sweater she had borrowed from Liam, her waitress uniform long gone. He said the document was destroyed, Liam corrected. But Arthur Sterling is a coward. Cowards always keep insurance. If Karim ever turned on him, Arthur would need leverage. Sterling's office, Sarah asked. Too secure. His home? Maybe. But look at this. Liam pulled up a floor plan on one of the monitors. This is the Blackwood estate. The sale is being finalized at a gala auction tomorrow night. It's a charity ball for the preservation of British heritage. The irony is sickening. Karim is hosting it? Yes. At the estate itself. He's turning the ballroom, your ballroom, into a stage for his victory lap. All the investors will be there, the press, the politicians. Sarah stared at the screen. The image of her childhood home, the place where she learned to ride a bike, the place where her mother is buried in the family plot. Now it was draped in banners with Al-Sayed's logo. If Arthur has the report, Sarah murmured, her mind racing. He wouldn't keep it in London. He's too paranoid. He would keep it close to the deal. The estate, Liam said, realizing her train of thought. There's a safe in the library, hidden behind the false panel in the wainscoting. My father showed it to me when I was 6. Liam looked at her. Does Karim know about it? No, only a Blackwood knows. If the report is in there, Liam started. We get the report, Sarah said, her voice hardening. And we don't just leak it to the press, we present it. Live. At the gala? Liam grinned. That's suicide. You're blacklisted. Security will have your photo at every checkpoint. Sarah walked over to the window, looking out at the grey London skyline. They are looking for Sarah the waitress, she said. They are looking for a girl in a cheap apron with messy hair. They aren't looking for Sarah Blackwood, the heiress. She turned back to Liam. I speak 6 languages, Liam. I know how to be a chameleon. I need a dress, a very expensive dress, and I need an invitation. Liam typed furiously on his keyboard. Invitation is hackable. The dress. Well, I have a friend in costume design at the Royal Opera House. We can make you look like royalty. Good, Sarah said, because tomorrow night, Karim Al-Sayed is going to learn that he didn't just buy a house. He bought a war. The Blackwood estate looked magnificent, illuminated by floodlights that cut through the night. A fleet of Rolls-Royces and Bentleys lined the long gravel driveway. The air was filled with the sound of string quartets and the clinking of champagne flutes. Inside the grand ballroom, Karim Al-Sayed was in his element. He held a glass of champagne, surrounded by fawning investors and corrupt city council members. A magnificent restoration project, Karim boasted to a reporter from the Times. We plan to turn the upper wings into ultra-luxury apartments while preserving the historic integrity of the ground floor. And the rumors about soil contamination? The reporter asked gently. Lies, Karim smiled, his teeth white and predatory. Spread by jealous competitors. We have a clean bill of health. Arthur Sterling stood nearby, looking nauseous. He kept checking his watch. He wanted the auction to be over. He wanted the papers signed so he could take his cut and retire to the Cayman Islands. Ladies and gentlemen, the auctioneer announced from the podium, if everyone could please take their seats. We are about to begin the final bidding for the title deed of the Blackwood estate. The room quieted down. The lights dimmed, spotlighting the podium. At the back of the room, the heavy oak doors opened. Security stepped forward to stop the late arrival, but they froze. Walking into the room was a vision. A woman in a floor-length gown of emerald silk that matched her eyes. She wore diamonds, fake but convincing, around her neck. Her hair was no longer in a tight bun, but cascaded in waves down her back. Her makeup was sharp, accentuating her high cheekbones. She didn't walk like a waitress. She walked with the regal, effortless confidence of someone who has walked these floors her entire life. She moved through the crowd. People parted for her, assuming she was a foreign princess or a movie star. Karim looked up. He squinted. The woman looked familiar, but... No, it couldn't be. The girl from the bar was a mouse. This woman was a lioness. Sarah walked straight to the front row, right where the reserved seats for the VIP bidders were. She sat down directly across from Arthur Sterling. Arthur choked on his drink. Sarah turned to him and smiled. It was the same smile she had given him in the bar, but magnified by 1,000 watts of power. "Good evening, Arthur," she said. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Miss Blackwood, if you don't mind," she corrected him, loud enough for the people around them to hear. Karim saw her. His face went purple. He signaled frantically to his head of security, the brute named Omar. Omar began to move toward her. Sarah didn't flinch. She simply raised her hand, holding a small, silver flash drive. "Before you throw me out, Karim," she said, her voice projecting clearly in the silent room, "you might want to check the safe in the library, the one behind the wainscoting." Arthur Sterling let out a small whimper. Karim stopped Omar with a sharp gesture. He walked over to her, leaning down, his voice a hiss of venom. "You have nothing," he whispered. "You are trespassing. I will have you arrested." "I'm here to bid," Sarah said calmly. "With what money?" Karim laughed, though it sounded nervous. "Your tips?" "No," Sarah said. She stood up, turning to face the room. She saw Liam standing by the tech booth, giving her a thumbs up. "I am Sarah Blackwood," she announced. The room gasped. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "The daughter? The one who disappeared?" "And I am here to tell you that this man," she pointed a manicured finger at Karim, "is selling you a death trap." "She's lying!" Karim shouted. "Security, remove her!" "I have the report," Sarah's voice rang out, commanding the space. "The Sterling Group's own internal report. Chemical ID, 44 Bravo. Highly carcinogenic runoff in the water table. It's not just in the soil. It's in the water supply for the village." The screens behind the auctioneer, screens meant to show glamorous photos of the estate, suddenly flickered. Liam had done his job. Instead of the estate, a document appeared on the massive screens. It was stamped confidential. It showed red charts, warning signs, and Arthur Sterling's signature at the bottom. The room erupted. "Turn it off!" Kareem screamed at the technicians. "Turn it off!" But the technicians were locked out. Sarah turned to Kareem. The cameras were flashing now, blinding white lights capturing his moment of ruin. She stepped closer to him. The microphones picked up her next words. She didn't speak English. She didn't speak French or German. She spoke the one language that would cut him deepest in front of his investors from the Gulf who were watching via satellite link. She spoke Arabic in the formal, poetic, and devastatingly clear classical dialect. "The house built on lies will collapse on the head of the liar," she recited. "You thought you could buy honor with money, Mr. Al-Sayed. But honor is like blood. You cannot buy it. You can only lose it." Kareem looked around. His investors were standing up, looking furious. The reporter from the Times was typing frantically on his phone. Arthur Sterling was trying to sneak out the side door, only to be blocked by 2 police officers who had just entered the room, escorted by Liam. "And one more thing," Sarah said, switching back to English for the cameras. She looked at the terrified Arthur Sterling. "The police have the audio recording of you conspiring to bribe the environmental inspector, and the order to have me assaulted." Kareem looked at Sarah. He looked at the screen showing his crimes. He looked at the police moving toward him. For the first time in his life, the billionaire had nothing to say. He was silenced. The chaos in the grand ballroom of the Blackwood estate did not end quickly. It was a slow-motion car crash of high society. As the flashing lights of police cruisers washed over the gravel driveway outside, mixing with the floodlights of the gala, the atmosphere inside shifted from shock to a frenzy of self-preservation. Kareem Al-Sayed, a man who had never worn handcuffs in his life, stared at the cold steel circling his wrists. He wasn't screaming anymore. He was in a state of catatonic disbelief. The detective chief inspector, a stern woman named DCI Harrow, was reading him his rights. She didn't look like she played golf with Arthur Sterling. She looked like she ate men like Arthur for breakfast. "You are making a mistake," Kareem hissed, his voice low, his eyes darting around for an ally. "Do you know how much tax revenue I bring to this city? I will have your badge." "You have the right to remain silent," DCI Harrow said, tightening the cuff. "And given the recording Ms. Blackwood provided, I highly suggest you exercise it." Arthur Sterling was less composed. He was weeping openly, sitting on one of the velvet auction chairs, clutching his chest. "I was forced. He threatened me. The toxicity report. I wanted to release it. He made me hide it." Sarah watched from the edge of the stage. Her adrenaline was beginning to fade, replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. But she stood tall. The emerald dress, the costume she had worn to infiltrate the lion's den, felt like armor. Liam Cross appeared beside her, holding 2 glasses of water. He handed one to her. "You realize you just became the most famous woman in London, right?" Liam said, nodding toward the wall of paparazzi that was being held back by uniformed officers at the entrance. "I didn't do it for the fame," Sarah said, taking a sip. Her hands were finally shaking. "Is it over?" "The arrest is just the beginning," Liam warned gently. "Now comes the hard part. The lawyers, the depositions, the mudslinging. They will try to bury you, Sarah. They will try to paint you as a disgruntled employee, a blackmailer, a fraud." Sarah looked at Karim as he was led away, his head bowed, shielding his face from the cameras. "Let them try," she whispered. "I have nothing left to lose, and I have 6 languages to tell the truth in." The following weeks were a blur of sterile rooms and grey London skies. Liam was right. The legal battle was brutal. Karim's legal team, a phalanx of the most expensive solicitors from the firm Highsmith and Vance, not the Vance from the banned list, just a coincidence of industry naming, descended upon the case like vultures. They attacked the recording. They claimed it was illegal entrapment. They claimed the translation was inaccurate. They claimed Sarah had doctored the audio. The pivotal moment came during the preliminary hearing at the Old Bailey. The defense attorney, a slick man with a reptilian smile, tried to dismiss the Arabic portion of the recording, the specific threat to break her hands, as a harmless colloquialism. "Your Honor," the attorney argued, pacing the floor. Mr. Al-Sayed was speaking in a regional dialect. The phrase he used, loosely translated, means to stop someone from working. It is a metaphor. He was merely expressing frustration with a clumsy waitress. It was not a threat of physical violence. The judge frowned. The prosecution looked worried. Standard Arabic translators often missed the nuances of the specific Gulf Street slang Karim had used. Sarah, sitting in the witness box, raised her hand. "Ms. Blackwood?" the judge asked. "May I address the translation, Your Honor?" Sarah asked clearly. The defense attorney scoffed. "Objection. The witness is a waitress, not a certified linguist." "Actually," Sarah said, pulling a folded document from her blazer pocket, "I took the liberty of having my credentials certified by the Institute of Linguists this week. But more importantly, I would like to call attention to the specific verb used." She turned to the jury. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like a professor. The word Mr. Al-Sayed used was kasar, in the specific dialect of the chaotic markets where he grew up, a dialect I learned while negotiating construction contracts in Dubai for 3 years. Kasar, when applied to hands, is never metaphorical. It is a specific instruction used by gang enforcers. Furthermore, if you listen to the audio at the 14-minute mark, he follows it with mustashfa, hospital. Put her in the hospital. Is that a metaphor for unemployment, too? The courtroom went silent. The defense attorney froze. Sarah continued, her voice ringing with authority. "He didn't think I understood him. He thought his language was a code. But arrogance is a universal language, and it always has the same grammar. Underestimation." The judge looked at the defense attorney. "Objection overruled. The translation stands." That was the nail in the coffin. With the threat validated, the conspiracy charge stuck. The toxicity report, which police found exactly where Sarah said it would be, in the library safe, proved the fraud. The fallout was nuclear. The Sterling Group filed for bankruptcy 3 days after the hearing. Arthur Sterling, in a desperate bid for leniency, turned King's evidence against Karim, revealing a decade of money laundering, bribery, and environmental violations. Karim Al-Sayed was denied bail. His assets in the UK were frozen. The clean energy facade he had built crumbled, revealing a rot that extended across 3 continents. But for Sarah, the victory wasn't in the headlines. It was in a quiet hospital room. She sat by her father's bed. William Blackwood was sitting up, reading a newspaper for the first time in years. The headline read, "Blackwood Estate Saved. Court Voids. Fraudulent Sale." "We got it back, Dad," Sarah said softly. William looked at her. His speech was still slow, the stroke having taken its toll, but his eyes were clear. You fought them, Sarah. You fought them all." "I had help," She smiled, thinking of Liam, who was currently downstairs arguing with a nurse about visiting hours. But William frowned, looking at the article. The money, the debt, the bank. They still own it. Not exactly, Sarah said. She reached into her bag and pulled out a letter. See, when the fraud was exposed, the bank that foreclosed on us came under investigation. It turns out they were colluding with Sterling. To avoid a massive lawsuit from the government, they settled. Settled? They returned the deed to the Blackwood Trust, Sarah explained. The debt is wiped clean. We don't have the millions we lost, Dad. We can't live like royalty anymore. But the house, the land, it's ours. And the council has agreed to pay for the environmental cleanup using seized assets from Al Sayed. William Blackwood closed his eyes, tears leaking out. The burden of failure, the guilt that had nearly killed him, finally lifted. Home, he whispered. Yes, Sarah said, kissing his forehead. Home. The Sapphire Lounge at the Kensington Monarch was as busy as ever. The clinking of glasses, the murmur of wealthy patrons, the smell of expensive perfume, it was all the same. But Preston, the manager, was having a terrible night. Where is the new girl? He snapped, looking around the floor. Table 4 is waiting for their champagne. He looked toward the entrance, expecting a terrified server. Instead, he saw a couple walking in. The man was handsome, with messy hair and a leather jacket that looked out of place in the high-end hotel, Liam Cross, whose book about the Al Sayed scandal was currently #1 on the bestseller lists. And on his arm was a woman who made the room stop. She wore a simple but elegant navy dress. She held herself with a poise that made the air around her seem sharper. Preston dropped his pen. Sarah. She walked up to the host stand. She didn't look at the floor where she used to scrub spills. She looked Preston in the eye. Hello, Preston, she said. You can't be here, Preston stammered. He looked terrified. He had given a statement to the police supporting Kareem, a statement that had been proven false. He was lucky he hadn't been charged with obstruction. We have a reservation, Sarah said calmly. Table 1, the booth in the back. That table is reserved for VIPs, Preston said, though his voice lacked its old bite. I know, Sarah smiled. My company, Blackwood Global Communications, is hosting a dinner there. We consult for international firms on linguistic nuance and cultural risk management. I believe you know my clients. She gestured behind her. 2 executives from a major Swiss bank walked in, looking for Sarah. Ah, Mademoiselle Blackwood, one of the Swiss bankers said in French. Nous sommes prêts pour la négociation. We are ready for the negotiation. Parfait, Sarah replied flawlessly. Allons-y. Perfect, let's go. She turned back to Preston. He looked small. He looked like a man trapped in a job he hated, serving people he envied. Preston, Sarah said, her voice kind but firm. Make sure the water is sparkling, and don't hover. We have important business to discuss. She took Liam's arm and walked past him. As they sat in table 1, the same booth where Kareem had mocked her, the same booth where she had been treated like furniture, Sarah felt a sense of closure. Liam poured the water. How does it feel? He asked. Sarah looked around the room. She saw the servers rushing back and forth. She saw a young girl with a tray, looking tired, terrified of dropping a glass. Excuse me, Sarah said to the young waitress as she passed. The girl froze. Yes, ma'am? I'm sorry. I'll get your wine right away. No rush, Sarah said gently. She pulled a £50 note from her purse and pressed it into the girl's hand. But when you get a moment, take a break. And remember, never let them think they're smarter than you just because they're louder. The girl looked at the money, then at Sarah, confusion and gratitude warring in her eyes. "Thank you, Mum." Sarah turned back to Liam. She picked up her menu. "It feels," she said, switching to Portuguese just to make Liam laugh, "como o começo," like the beginning. Karim Al-Sayed was sitting in a 6x8 cell in Belmarsh prison, staring at a concrete wall. Arthur Sterling was in witness protection, living in a dreary apartment in Hull, and Sarah Blackwood was sitting at the head of the table, speaking her truth in every language she chose. The waitress was gone. The huntress had retired. The queen had returned. And that is how Sarah Blackwood turned the tables on the men who thought they owned the world. It's a powerful reminder that true power isn't about the money in your bank account or the suit you wear. It's about what you know, and the quiet strength to use it when the time is right. Karim made the mistake of judging a book by its cover, never realizing that the waitress he mocked was writing his ending the entire time. Have you ever been underestimated by someone in a position of power? Or have you ever kept a skill hidden until the perfect moment? I want to hear your stories in the comments below. If you enjoyed Sarah's revenge and want more stories where karma hits back hard, please hit that like button, share this video with a friend who needs some inspiration, and don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a drama. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next story.